Farmer Boy. Keeping House, Part 2. That day they made ice cream again, and they ate the last cake. Alice said she knew how to make a pound cake. She said she'd make one, and then she was going to go sit in the parlor. Almanzo thought that wouldn't be any fun, but Eliza Jane said, "You'll do no such thing, Alice. You know very well the parlor's just for company." It was not Eliza Jane's parlor, and Mother hadn't said she couldn't sit in it. Almanzo thought that Alice could sit in the parlor if she wanted to. That afternoon, he came into the kitchen to see if the pound cake was done. Alice was taking it out of the oven. It smelled so good that he broke a little piece off the corner. Then Alice cut a slice to hide the broken place, and then they ate 2 more slices with the last of the ice cream. "I can make some more ice cream," Alice said. Eliza Jane was upstairs, and Almanzo said, "Let's go into the parlor." They tiptoed in without making a sound. The light was dim because the blinds were down, but the parlor was beautiful. The wallpaper was white and gold, and the carpet was of Mother's best weaving, almost too fine to step on. The center table was marble-topped, and it held the tall parlor lamp, all white and gold china, and pink-painted roses. Beside it lay the photograph album, with covers of red velvet and mother of pearl. All around the walls stood solemn horsehair chairs, and George Washington's picture looked sternly from its frame between the windows. Alice hitched up her hoops behind and sat on the sofa. The slippery haircloth slid her right off onto the floor. She didn't dare laugh out loud for fear Eliza Jane would hear. She sat on the sofa again and slid off again. Then Almanzo slid off a chair. When company came and they had to sit in the parlor, they kept themselves on the slippery chairs by pushing their toes against the floor. But now they could let go and slide. They slid off the sofa and the chairs till Alice was giggling so hard they didn't dare slide anymore. Then they looked at the shells and the coral and the little china figures on the whatnot. They didn't touch anything. They looked till they heard Eliza Jane coming downstairs. Then they ran tiptoe out of the parlor and shut the door without a sound. Eliza Jane didn't catch them. It seemed that a week would last forever, but suddenly it was gone. One morning at breakfast, Eliza Jane said, "Father and Mother will be here tomorrow." They all stopped eating. The garden had not been weeded. The peas and beans had not been picked, so the vines were ripening too soon. The hen house had not been whitewashed. "This house is a sight," Eliza Jane said, "and we must churn today. But what am I going to tell Mother? The sugar is all gone." Nobody ate any more. They looked into the sugar barrel, and they could see the bottom of it. Only Alice tried to be cheerful. "We must hope for the best," she said, like Mother. "There's some sugar left. Mother said don't eat all the sugar, and we didn't. There's some around the edges." This was only the beginning of that awful day. They all went to work as hard as they could. Royal and Almanzo hoed the garden. They whitewashed the hen house. They cleaned the cows' stalls and swept the south barn floor. The girls were sweeping and scrubbing in the house. Eliza Jane made Almanzo churn till the butter came, and then her hands flew while she washed and salted it and packed it in the tub. There was only bread and butter and jam for dinner, though Almanzo was starved. "Now, Almanzo, you polish the heater," Eliza Jane said. He hated to polish stoves, but he hoped Eliza Jane would not tell that he had wasted candy on his pig. He went to work with the stove blacking and the brush. Eliza Jane was hurrying and nagging. "Be careful you don't spill the polish," she said, busily dusting. Almanzo guessed he knew enough not to spill stove polish, but he didn't say anything. "Use less water, Almanzo, and mercy, rub harder than that." He didn't say anything. Eliza Jane went into the parlor to dust. She called, "Almanzo, that stove done now?" "No," said Almanzo. "Goodness, don't dawdle so," Almanzo muttered. "Whose boss are you?" Eliza Jane asked. "What's that you say?" "Nothing," Almanzo said. Eliza Jane came to the door. "You did so say something." Almanzo straightened up and shouted, "I say, whose boss are you?" Eliza Jane gasped. Then she cried out, "You just wait, Almanzo James Wilder. You just wait till I tell Almanzo didn't mean to throw the blacking brush. It flew right out of his hand. It sailed past Eliza Jane's head. Smack! It hit the parlor wall. A great splash and smear of blacking appeared on the white and gold wallpaper. Alice screamed. Almanzo turned around and ran all the way to the barn. He climbed into the haymow and crawled far back in the hay. He did not cry, but he would have cried if he hadn't been almost 10 years old. Mother would come home and find he had ruined her beautiful parlor. Father would take him into the woodshed and whip him with the black snake whip. He didn't want ever to come out of the haymow. He wished he could stay there forever. After a long while, Royal came into the haymow and called him. He crawled out of the hay, and he saw that Royal knew. "Manny, you'll get an awful whipping," Royal said. Royal was sorry, but he couldn't do anything. They both knew that Almanzo deserved whipping, and there was no way to keep Father from knowing it. So Almanzo said, "I don't care." He helped to do the chores, and he ate supper. He wasn't hungry, but he ate to show Eliza Jane he didn't care. Then he went to bed. The parlor door was shut, but he knew how the black splotch looked on the white and gold wall. Next day, Father and Mother came driving into the yard. Almanzo had to go out to meet them with the others. Alice whispered to him, "Don't feel bad. Maybe they won't care." But she looked anxious too. Father said cheerfully, "Well, here we are. Been getting along all right?" "Yes, Father," Royal answered. Almanzo didn't go to help unhitch the driving horses. He stayed in the house. Mother hurried about, looking at everything, while she untied her bonnet strings. "I declare, Eliza Jane and Alice," she said, "you've kept the house as well as I'd have done myself." "Mother," Alice said in a small voice. "Mother." "Well, child, what is it?" "Mother," Alice said bravely, "you told us not to eat all the sugar. Mother, we ate almost all of it." Mother laughed. "You've all been so good," she said. "I won't scold about the sugar." She did not know that the black splotch was on the parlor wall. The parlor door was shut. She did not know that day, nor all the next day. Almanzo could hardly choke down his food at meal times, and Mother looked worried. She took him to the pantry and made him swallow a big spoonful of horrible black medicine she had made of roots and herbs. He did not want her to know about the black splotch, and yet he wished she did know. When the worst was over, he could stop dreading it. That second evening they heard a buggy driving into the yard. Mr. and Mrs. Webb were in it. Father and Mother went out to meet them, and in a minute they all came into the dining room. Almanzo heard Mother saying, "Come right into the parlor." He couldn't move. He could not speak. This was worse than anything he had thought of. Mother was so proud of her beautiful parlor. She was so proud of keeping it always nice. She didn't know he had ruined it, and now she was taking company in. They would see that big black splotch on the wall. Mother opened the parlor door and went in. Mrs. Webb went in, and Mr. Webb and Father. Almanzo saw only their backs, but he heard the window shades going up. He saw that the parlor was full of light. It seemed to him a long time before anybody said anything. Then Mother said, "Take this big chair, Mr. Webb, and make yourself comfortable. Sit right here on the sofa, Mrs. Webb." Almanzo couldn't believe his ears. Mrs. Webb said, "You have such a beautiful parlor. I declare it's almost too fine to sit in." Now Almanzo could see where the blacking brush had hit the wall, and he could not believe his eyes. The wallpaper was pure white and gold. There was no black splotch. Mother caught sight of him and said, "Come in, Almanzo." Almanzo went in. He sat up straight on a haircloth chair and pushed his toes against the floor to keep him from sliding off. Father and Mother were telling all about the visit to Uncle Andrew's. There was no black splotch anywhere on the wall. "Didn't you worry leaving the children alone here and you so far away?" Mrs. Webb asked. "No," Mother said proudly. I knew the children would take care of everything as well as if James and I were home. Almanzo minded his manners and did not say a word. Next day, when no one was looking, he stole into the parlor. He looked carefully at the place where the black splotch had been. The wallpaper was patched. The patch had been cut out carefully around the gold scrolls, and the pattern was fitted perfectly, and the edges of the patch scraped so thin that he could hardly find them. He waited until he could speak to Eliza Jane alone, and then he asked, "Eliza Jane, did you patch the parlor wall for me?" "Yes," she said. "I got the scraps of wallpaper that were saved in the attic and cut out the patch and put it on with flour paste." Almanzo said gruffly, "I'm sorry I threw that brush at you. Honest, I didn't mean to, Eliza Jane." "I guess I was aggravating," she said, "but I didn't mean to be. You're the only little brother I've got." Almanzo had never known before how much he liked Eliza Jane. They never told about the black splotch on the parlor wall, and Mother never knew.